Greetings. Dear listeners, we have been blessed by Almighty God Allah over the 90 years of our work in the Nation of Islam and lifting our people up from the miserable condition in which we find ourselves. We ask your support of our effort, and we hope that you will be generous and make a contribution to the work of the Nation of Islam and the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan by clicking the button below or go to noi.org/donate. We thank you in advance for your support. May Allah God continue to bless you and your families. Assalamu alaikum.
But I cannot help my brother in his struggle if I am not helped in my own struggle. It's like one man hanging from a tree looking at his brother hanging from a tree. And he says to his brother who is hanging, "You know something? I want to help you get down." How can you help the hanging man over there until you get down off the tree yourself?
Berlin, 1885. German Chancellor Bismarck, the most powerful man of his time, invites to his palace 16 diplomats from the leading Western countries to sit together around a table. Their aim, to divide up between themselves a continent, Africa. And they will succeed. On a wall hangs a newly drawn 5-meter-high map of Africa, a huge table, and of course, no black people present. And 6 months of secret talks, noble declarations, bargaining. 6 months to dream of gold, ivory, and all the promised wealth of this new Eden, even though it is still called terra incognita. Western countries are engaged in a race for more territories. Actors will interpret the main characters of this untold story. In a dusty corner of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in Berlin, a trunk, which has remained unopened for 120 years. Inside, the transcriptions of the Berlin Conference. Every single word pronounced was written down in that protocol. This is the basis of our 90 and 52-minute docudrama telling how the colonization really started. Delving into these archives, worldwide specialists, each in his field, shed light on an unbelievable strategic chess game. A racialist vision of the world deeply engraved in the mind. Berlin, 1885. They draw lines on the maps. These lines are still the borders of Africa today. Berlin, 1885. The scramble for Africa.
Secondly, they also sowed the seed that made Africans believe that everything African was bad and everything Western, particularly in those days French and British, was more desirable and better. So that seed also was sown back in 1884 during the Berlin Conference. Fast forward, nothing has changed. The little country of Burundi, the little country of Rwanda, the country of Djibouti, Benin, Central African Republic, Togo. As a matter of fact, all the African countries were such small economies that it's very difficult to survive. It's very difficult to really take the country to the highest level that it can be. And also, we have very small economies that are easy to destabilize. So it's not bad enough that they broke us up into these tiny little countries in 1884. When they were leaving the continent, particularly France, France made its colonies, former colonies, sign what we call the Pact for the Continuation of Colonization. In this pact, the African countries were told, you got to pay colonial debt. What is colonial debt? They said, we brought you education. We built a few roads. We taught you about eating with a teaspoon and a fork. We call that colonial debt. You're going to pay that to perpetuity. To this day, African countries are still paying, Francophone African countries are still paying colonial debt. They also said, we will manage your money for you. All your monies will be printed in France. 85% of your bank reserves will be kept in France. And then collectively, we'll pool that 85% from your countries, and we will invest in the French stock market and under the French name, and your countries may or may not know what the returns are. And then not only that, the mineral resources, the oil, all of it discovered and yet to be discovered, France has the first right of refusal. French companies, they're going to be doing the mining, running the oil rigs, all the major projects, private and public. French companies have first right of refusal. The African companies only get whatever the French companies do not take.
So the picture that we have in the 21st century is Africa trapped by its past.
Very much so, because that pact for the continuation of colonization is in the books today and is still in force. French countries don't print their own money. Francophone African countries. So when you look at the pact for the continuation of colonization, you look at, for example, you look at Germany. What the havoc Germany created in Namibia, Germany continues to have a very strong hold in Namibia. Look at Belgium. What Belgium, King Leopold did in the Congo. over 75% of the population of the Congo was annihilated by King Leopold. And Belgium continues to have a very strong presence. Not as strong a hold as the French, but they still have a significant influence. British companies who own significant assets on the continent. 75% is reported of the resources at the London Stock Exchange are resources coming out of Africa, owned by English companies. In doing business in Africa. So when you look at Africa today, it's really Africa of yesteryear. And until we, the Africans, come together and realize that we're still very much under the control. Destiny. Yes, we're still very much under the influence of our colonizers.
So what do you think should be done, for example, to change the future and have better destiny? What should Africans do?
Africa needs to wake up. Okay. The Africans need to wake up. Why are we still continuing with the pact for the continuation of colonization? The Francophone countries need to come together and in a united way, let France know that that simply cannot go on. Africa is big enough. If only the Western world could stop exploiting Africa. Africa can absorb everybody. The whole world could move into Africa and everybody will do well. But the greed and selfishness coming out of the West is keeping Africa from moving forward. Now, there are others who may beg to differ and say, but Ambassador, there's a lot of corruption. I'll say, yes, I agree with you. Some might say we have corruption. The numbers are saying about $50 billion leaves Africa to Europe through corruption. Well, I'm saying, who is receiving that money? You say it takes two to tango. I can't be corrupt by myself. So while we talk about corruption in Africa, let's also talk about the corruptors who are receiving that $50 billion. That's one. Secondly, if you want to talk about the $50 billion that's coming out of Africa, claiming that the leaders are taking the money, yes, we do have some, very few, African leaders that are not doing it by their people. The majority of the African leaders are doing very well by their people. Be it as it may, you take 50 billion through corruption. France alone is taking out of Africa 500 to 600 billion every year. So if we want to talk about this 50 billion, we must also talk about the 500 billion. That is just France alone. We're not talking about Germany. We're not talking about Belgium. We're not talking about Britain. Are you with me? It's upwards of billions of dollars are coming out of Africa. Nobody wants to touch this 10,000 pound gorilla. I am saying, in order for us to really look at 21st century Africa, we must understand our history that continues to be alive and well in our lives today. And guess who needs to make that change? Who needs to get that understanding and realization? It's you and I, the Africans.
We have to come together, renegotiate with other partnering continents to shape the future of Africa.
But in order for us to even go to the negotiating table, we must clean our mind. Because we are very much colonized. You know as much as I do, my brother. You walk into a negotiating table. In general, we, black people, we go in feeling superior to our Caucasian brothers and sisters. And they come in feeling superior. So before the conversation even begins, we, the Africans, are defeated. Already defeated. How do you get a Francophone man in Africa, African Francophone, who actually believes he's a Frenchman? How then do you take him, put him on the same table with the Frenchman and expecting him to feel equal?
How can we change the mindset?
We continue to talk, which is why I'm glad you brought me here. Because it's about awareness. It's about getting people to understand our history, where we have been, and how much our past, sadly for us, our past is still very much alive and well within us. So we need to wake up as Africans and realize that we're just as smart as everybody else, and that when we go to the negotiating table, we should have nothing but Africa on our minds. Our problem is we are now being used as our own instrument for self-destruction. We are the ones who talk negative about Africa all the time. They feed us the information and we don't even realize that we are being manipulated. And we are the worst when it comes to Africa. No. Other countries, no matter how bad things are in their countries, they stand up for their countries and they defend their countries. It's like a family. You and I, my brother, we can fight within ourselves in the home. But the minute an outsider comes in, no, game is over. We're after the outsider. We need to realize that as Africa, we are a family and we have a responsibility to defend Africa at all costs. because they are using
You
us
go to Nigeria,
to destroy us.
which is, if not the most corrupt nation in Africa, and it is, it could be the most corrupt nation in the world, Minister Farrakhan.
Oh, now, Mr. Wallace.
It is the most corrupt nation that I have ever covered. I've been there 25 years ago, and I've been there as recently as last year.
Fine. So what? 35 years old. That's what that nation is. Now, here's America, 226 years old. You love democracy, but there in Africa, you're trying to force these people into a system of government that you just have accepted. 30 years ago, black folk got the right to vote. You're not in any moral position to tell anybody how corrupt they are. You should be quiet and let those of us who know our people go there and help them get out of that condition. But America should keep her mouth shut wherever there's a corrupt regime, as much hell as America has raised on the earth. No, I will not allow America, or you, Mr. Wallace, to condemn them as the most corrupt nation on earth when you have spilled the blood of human beings. Has Nigeria dropped an atomic bomb and killed people in Hiroshima and Nagasaki? Have they killed off millions of Native Americans? How dare you put yourself in that position as a moral judge? I think you should keep quiet, because with that much blood on America's hands, you have no right to speak. I will speak because I don't have that blood on my hand. Yes, there's corruption there. Yes, there's mismanagement of resources. Yes, there is abuse. There's abuse in every nation on earth, including this one. So let's not play holy to moralize on them. Let's help them.
I'm not moralizing. I'm asking a question, and I got an answer.
Why would you put it as the most corrupt regime in the world? That doesn't make sense.
Can you think of one more corrupt?
Yeah, I'm living in one. I'm living in one. Yes, you've done a hell of a thing on this earth, so you should not be the one to talk. You should be quiet when it comes to moral condemnation.
What's that?
So I shall not read anything, but I shall say to you what thoughts were revealed to me that I should say to you. This is an august body of leaders. Leaders of thousands, leaders of tens of thousands, leaders of millions. The problem in the world today is not followers. The problem in the world today is with leadership. The Bible says, if the blind lead the blind, both fall in the ditch. And if our leaders are spiritually blind and morally bankrupt, we have no right to lead our people. So I shall quote from the Quran a verse that was given to me this morning, and its relevance only you can bear witness whether this is coming from one's own vanity or from the Lord of creation. In the 103rd surah or chapter of the Quran, titled Al-Asr, meaning the time, Allah says to us in the Quran, in the name of Allah, the Beneficent, the Merciful, by the time, surely man is in loss, except those who believe and do good, and enjoin one another to truth, and enjoin one another to patience. In the Muslim prayer, Asr prayer is performed when the sun is midway between its zenith and the point of its setting. These verses of the Quran are not just talking about a time of prayer. It's talking about the time of the setting of the sun on a civilization. By the time, surely man is in loss. We are here at a summit because each one of us is losing power, losing authority, losing wealth, losing self-esteem, losing losing the dignity of our own humanity because we are in a new form of slavery called debt. Surely man is in loss. Why? Because we are not aware of what time it is. Not by the watch, the Rolex, or the Timex, but the watch of God's clock. What time is it? We are at the time of the end of white supremacy. We are at the time, no, I want you to listen. I don't need applause. I just want us to think. We are at the time of the end of white domination over the darker people of the world. We are at the time of the end of racism, at the time of the end of sexism, and we are at the time of the end of materialism. So if we are leading people and we are unaware of the time and what the time demands, then our leadership will suffer loss. What time is it, dear leaders? It is time for us to lead our people in accord with the time. Time demands that those of us who have been enslaved be free. Time demands that those of us who yesterday suffered under colonial rule must come out from under colonial power. Time demands that neo-colonialism must never be allowed to be substituted for an old form of colonialism which allows a black face to administrate over the same old plantation system of our former colonial masters. What time is it, dear leaders? And as I reflected on that, I was given a picture from the Bible showing you that the unity of religion is absolutely necessary to the freedom of our people. In most African countries, Muslims and Christians are not in unity with one another. Muslims and Christians are constantly arguing. Tribal differences are destroying national purpose and will. So we have to grow into a kind of knowledge that brings religion together, grows tribe into nation, and grows organization into organizational strength, as Mary McLeod Bethune said, that we need the unity of organizations. What is the picture that I was shown? In the book of Ezekiel in the Bible, there's a story about a baby that came to birth, but the baby was in an open field covered in the blood of the afterbirth. And there was no one present to cut the umbilical cord, and there was no one present to wash the baby that was polluted in its own blood. And there was no one present to diaper the baby. And so the writer in the scripture says, and I walked by and I saw this baby in an open field, and I said, live. Because the baby could not live polluted in its blood, and it could not live without the umbilical cord cut, and it could not live except there was someone there to perform a duty by that child. Who is that child? Polluted in its blood. Did you know, my dear and beloved leaders, that there can never be independence as a gift? No European government can grant you independence. Independence is not given away. Independence is earned through self-development. Please listen. This is how you got here from your mother's womb. Independence couldn't be given to you by your mother. You earned it by developing beyond the ability of the tiny house called womb to hold you in its grip. And when the womb could no longer hold you, your head forged the way for your freedom. And that's what these heads are for. They are to forge the way to freedom of the people who line up behind your leadership, hungering and thirsting for liberty and the pursuit of happiness and the opportunity to express the gifts that God has given them. But what is the condition of the baby? Some of us have been free 5 years, some of us 10, some of us 15 years, some of us 20, some of us 30, but we lay in an open field, polluted in the blood of colonialism, polluted in the afterbirth of what white European, white supremacists have imposed on Africa and on Arab nations. Beloved leaders and guides for the people, when we say polluted in the blood, it means we still live the life of a slave. We don't think like free men. We go to the capitals of America and Europe like beggars, weak to demand or ask for what unjust regimes will never give. Unless we develop power to force unjust governments to yield to just demands, we will never achieve what we desire for our people. The umbilical cord is not cut. All French-speaking countries are tied to France. And the blood of all colonialism is covering all Francophone leaders. I must speak honestly and frankly. Please listen. Please listen. All Anglophone leaders are tied to England. All of us are tied to our former masters in one way or another. And therefore, we don't talk about freedom. We talk about emancipation. Well, what is the meaning of the word? Emancipation comes from two Latin words, or one Latin word, mancipere, which means to free from your hand, but not from your control. You are freed from the hand of Europe, but you are still under the control of Europe. We are free from the hand of the government of white America and oppression and racism in that form, but we are still tied to them in many other ways. And until we can untie and truly cut the umbilical cord and come to a state of real independence, then we are fooling ourselves. We are self-deluded. We have pomp and circumstance of real power, but beneath it there is no real substance. So we pat each other on the back and say nice things to one another to make each other feel good, but each one of us in our own way knows how powerless we are when it comes to having real power and meaningful power to change the conditions under which our poor people suffer. And so the last thing I will say, we need to be washed from colonial education, an education that makes us lead our people in the way of our former masters rather than lead them in the way of true independence. We don't need French masters to tell us how to educate African children, nor do we need to be approved by England to teach our people what our people need to know. Each one of you have been educated in some of the finest universities and colleges of the world. But what good is it for us to be educated and our people to be ignorant? That imposes upon us a duty and a responsibility. Each one of us as leaders live in fine homes. We wear fine clothes. We drive in fine cars. But our people have nothing to eat because sometimes we lead not for the benefit of the people who we are supposed to lead for. Sometimes we lead our people to the benefit of our former colonial masters. So they won't trouble your leadership because your leadership is ineffective. Every strong leader that Africa produced has been killed by the same forces that hate black progress. Not only in Africa, but in America, we have seen our leaders who lead for our good cut down. We could call the roll on both sides of the Atlantic, but you and I are the leaders of today. You have the baton of leadership in your hand, and I have it in mine, and we, dear brothers and sisters, have it in ours. But the question is, will we lead, or will we play a game of let's get along? Get along for what purpose? You cannot sell out the future of your nation in order to live in luxury at the expense of the yearning of our people for self-development and economic development. Nor can our hands across the water be served by greedy, ambitious business people who are not really concerned with the development of a people but want to fatten their own pockets at the expense of people. We got to, no. I only have another minute, so just let me say what I have to say. I'm not trying to embarrass anybody. I'm not trying to hurt anyone's feelings. But I'm not a politician. I'm a man of God. And as a man of God, I cannot help myself. I have to say what God demands of me to say. Whether you like me or not is irrelevant and immaterial. I'm not seeking a vote. I'm seeking to be accepted by God as a representative of His will. So I close now, beloved leaders, begging you on behalf of our people to lead for the good of all of our people. Lead for the development of our people. Lead to erase ignorance from the heads of our people. And above all, let no one keep African leaders divided against each other. And let no one in America keep us divided one against each other. We don't communicate with each other. Therefore, an enemy gets between us and represents me to you and you to me. And therefore, I don't like you and you don't like me. And we never get together to strengthen our bond of unity. And it is the same in Africa. There are those who will tell you who you should be with and who you should not be with. I say to the government of the United States of America, you have a big role to play, but not a role to crush the growing good leadership in Africa. Your role is one of a nurturer. The baby is laying in the open field. Somebody has to wash the baby. Somebody has to cut the umbilical cord. Somebody has to nurse the baby to strength. That's what America, that's what the governments of Europe should be doing. The government of America should be in Africa, helping every African government to help itself. No African government can be free with its mouth in the kitchen of Europe. Every African government must grow food to feed itself. Every African government, I repeat, must grow food to feed itself. Do not let Europeans tell you that your land cannot grow food. You are eating. The animals are eating. Grow food and become self-independent. For when you grow your own food, make your own clothing and build your own shelter, you become economically free. But you are tied to Europe in an ungodly way. You buy butter from them as though we can't make butter. We buy milk from them. We buy material from them that we could grow right on the African continent. I say, brothers and sisters, I want to be a leader, not for others. I would love to be a leader that God approves of, that leads for the sake of God and for the sake of the people. I appeal to you in the name of Allah. Leave this conference and go home and think about what we can do together to raise all of our people up from the bondage of ignorance and from the weakness that is under the foot of oppression.
We are inheritors of an amazing continent, richest continent by far in the world. No continent comes even close. And every day we are discovering more and more resources, while the rest of the world is looking to Africa for all its needs. Its children, the Africans, the African diaspora, we're completely oblivious to that fact.
Yeah, but by the way, there's a very powerful quotation which says, we found the enemy and it is us.
Yes.
So where Africa,
Yes.
we can trace back is us. And if we want to have a different future, then the change starts within. And I think schools, media, leaders, and so on play a great role to change that. I just want to also talk about...
let me correct you on that one. The media also is not playing a good role.
The African media, I mean.
is painting, even that media is controlled. It's painting a negative image of Africa. The media could, but the media is not telling the story. It's perpetuating the same narrative of a dark, diseased continent, dying people, at war with itself. The media could also help us by showing a balanced view of Africa. That is not happening.
The same people who have the audacity to tell us that we are poor countries, they are taking trillions out of Africa every year. And what is the African doing? Like an obedient, programmed black man, we just give in. We know the facts, but we just do nothing about it. Now, you have to say some of the fears are real, because the France that has sold you inferior equipment to theirs, France that has trained your military to be inferior to their military, they are now in your country. They can invade you. They have the permission to do so. They can destabilize you. And then one might say, why is it that African leaders haven't done anything about this deplorable situation? Well, let me tell you, my brother and sister, they have tried. Documented to this day, 22 coups where leaders were assassinated. France had something to do with it. The first 7, when they decided they were pulling out of the CFA and that they're going to print their own money, they were assassinated. Every time an African leader has tried to do what's best for their country, they were assassinated. Majority of them aided by France. It's a known fact.
Every strong leader that Africa produced has been killed by the same forces that hate black progress. Not only in Africa, but in America, we have seen our leaders who lead for our good cut down. We could call the roll on both sides of the Atlantic, but you and I are the leaders of today. You have the baton of leadership in your hand, and I have it in mine, and we, dear brothers and sisters, have it in ours. But the question is, will we lead, or will we play a game of let's get along? Get along for what purpose? You cannot sell out the future of your nation in order to live in luxury at the expense of the yearning of our people for self-development and economic development. Nor can our hands across the water be served by greedy, ambitious business people who are not really concerned with the development of a people but want to fatten their own pockets at the expense of people. We got to, no. I only have another minute, so just let me say what I have to say. I'm not trying to embarrass anybody. I'm not trying to hurt anyone's feelings. But I'm not a politician. I'm a man of God. And as a man of God, I cannot help myself. I have to say what God demands of me to say. Whether you like me or not is irrelevant and immaterial. I'm not seeking a vote. I'm seeking to be accepted by God as a representative of His will. So I close now, beloved leaders, begging you on behalf of our people to lead for the good of all of our people. Lead for the development of our people. Lead to erase ignorance from the heads of our people. And above all, let no one keep African leaders divided against each other. And let no one in America keep us divided one against each other. We don't communicate with each other. Therefore, an enemy gets between us and represents me to you and you to me, and therefore I don't like you and you don't like me, and we never get together to strengthen our bond of unity. And it is the same in Africa. There are those who will tell you who you should be with. I thank God for this summit that allowed me to be in a room with the distinguished Louis Sullivan, Reverend Joe Lowry, Jesse Jackson, Coretta Scott King, Dorothy Height, these magnificent leaders of our people. You don't know how my heart burns to be with you in solidarity, regardless to whether you disagree with me or not. You can reshape me if I'm misshapen. You can help me if I'm out of line, but you can't help me if you don't talk to me. I have the courage of David to stand before Goliath. And I don't need the weapons of the world to defeat him. But I do want encouragement from the army of the people of God. That if I will stand, will you just help me to stand better? If I will speak, will you help me to speak better? If I don't say it right, help me to shape the words better. But let us not let the enemy of all of us keep us apart one from another. Because a weak hand on that side of the Atlantic reaching across to a weak hand on this side of the Atlantic makes both of us weak and ineffective, and we'll be around here conferencing for the next 100 years, and we will see nothing of it but a whole lot of talk and no reality behind that. But if we determine from this day that we will go back to America and we will let nobody keep us from the bond of unity, that we will fight for unity on that side to maximize our power so that we can speak to our government in proper terms and strengthen our government in the will to do better by Africa. That won't happen if we are divided, but it will happen if we can speak with one strong voice. And on this side, if you, the leaders, will not let any European counsel you or American counsel you in division, but if you will strengthen your unity one with another and let nothing and no one come between you, then a strong hand in Africa and a strong united hand in America will make the vision of this great man and the vision of W.E.B. Du Bois and Padmore and Garvey and Martin King and Elijah Muhammad and Malcolm X, we'll make it all come to fruition if we will get away from the pettiness of self-aggrandizement and recognize that each one of us is passing from the scene, and we must leave our children and our children's children a better world, and we cannot sell out their future for ham and turkey. May God bless you as I greet you in peace. Assalamu alaikum.
Rwanda, President of Rwanda, Cameroon, President Rwanda, Cameroon.
Ladies and
gentlemen,
The Honorable Elijah Muhammad said, "What is the square mileage of the earth? How much is the land and how much is the water?" The earth is 196,940,000 square miles. And the land is 57,255,000 square miles. And the water is 139,685,000 square miles. Don't tell me about Africa's my home. No, the earth is my home. The earth is the Lord's and the fullness thereof, and we are the Lord's that the fullness of the earth belongs to. So don't you narrow yourself again after today. We know what you mean when you say I'm an African. We understand that. But you got to grow up now into a deeper knowledge.
This house is dedicated to knowledge and to the spreading of knowledge. Elijah Muhammad inspired new thought, new mind, new way of civilization among black people. But he wanted a house from which a light could be lifted up to give guidance to all who would be guided as this world begins to close down. This National Center for the re-education and retraining of the black man and woman, but for the totality of the human family of our planet. I named this mosque after the only woman that the Quran names a chapter after, the mother of Jesus, Maryam. All human beings need to be re-educated. That is the purpose of the National Center.